The summer of 1983 arrived in Cedar Falls with the promise of endless possibilities and the scent of fresh-cut grass mixed with cigarette smoke from the local diner. Marcus Thompson adjusted his headphones as he surveyed the cramped radio booth of WKRP 103.7, the town's only rock station. At 19, he had already established himself as the voice that guided teenagers through their late-night confusion and early morning dreams. The station occupied the second floor of a converted warehouse on Main Street, its windows overlooking the sleepy downtown, where neon signs flickered promises of cold beer and hot coffee. Marcus had been working there for 8 months, ever since graduating high school, spinning records and fielding calls from lovesick teenagers who trusted him with their secrets. That particular Tuesday morning, as he queued up another track from Journey's latest album, Marcus noticed a figure moving around the station's main floor. Through the booth's glass partition, he could see someone organizing records with methodical precision, her auburn hair catching the fluorescent light as she worked. She wore faded jeans and a Madonna t-shirt, and there was something about the way she moved that made Marcus forget his next segue. Danny Rodriguez, the station owner's son and Marcus's closest friend, had mentioned that his sister would be helping out during the summer. Danny had always been protective of his family, especially his younger sister, who had just finished her sophomore year at the local community college. Marcus had heard stories about her, how she could outshoot anyone at the local arcade, how she read philosophy books for fun, and how she had once punched a guy for making inappropriate comments about her friend. As the morning progressed, Marcus found himself stealing glances at the mysterious figure below. She had transformed the chaotic record storage area into something resembling order, creating separate sections for different genres with handwritten labels that even from his elevated position he could see were written in careful cursive. Her attention to detail impressed him, but more than that, there was an energy about her that seemed to electrify the otherwise mundane space. During his lunch break, Marcus finally descended from his booth. The girl was sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by albums from the previous decade, seemingly absorbed in reading liner notes from a Pink Floyd record. She looked up as he approached, and Marcus felt his prepared introduction evaporate. Her eyes were the color of dark chocolate, and they held an intelligence that made him suddenly self-conscious about his rock star persona. She introduced herself as Carmen Rodriguez, and her voice carried the same musical quality that had made her brother such a natural on the radio. Marcus learned that she was majoring in communications with a focus on media studies, and she had convinced her father to let her help modernize the station's organization system. As they talked, Marcus discovered that Carmen possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of music that rivaled his own, and she could discuss the artistic merits of bands he had never even heard of. The afternoon flew by as they worked together, creating a new filing system that would make the DJs' lives significantly easier. Carmen had ideas about programming that went beyond simply playing the hits. She talked about creating themed shows, introducing listeners to underground bands, and using music as a bridge between different communities in their small town. Her passion was infectious, and Marcus found himself energized by possibilities he had never considered. As the sun began to set, painting the warehouse windows in shades of gold and crimson, Marcus realized that something had shifted in his world. Carmen had brought a new perspective to the station that went beyond organization and efficiency. She had reminded him why he had fallen in love with radio in the first place, the power to connect with people, to soundtrack their lives, and to create moments of shared experience across the airwaves. What do you think about Marcus and Carmen's first meeting? The chemistry is already building. Don't forget to subscribe to 80s Histories for more nostalgic stories like this one. Chapter 2. Static Interference. The following weeks established a routine that Marcus both anticipated and dreaded. Carmen arrived at the station each morning at 8, bringing with her a thermos of coffee and an infectious energy that transformed the sleepy workplace. She had convinced her father to let her create a comprehensive catalogue of the station's music library, a project that would keep her busy throughout the summer. Marcus found himself adjusting his schedule to coincide with Carmen's presence. He would arrive early to help her move heavy boxes of records, and he would linger after his shifts to discuss music and share stories about the callers who had confided in him during late-night radio shows. Their conversations revealed layers of compatibility that surprised them both. They shared similar tastes in books, movies, and obscure bands that most people in their small town had never heard of. But there was an elephant in the room that neither of them addressed directly. Danny Rodriguez had been Marcus's best friend since middle school, and the unspoken code of friendship clearly established that sisters were off-limits. Marcus had watched Danny intimidate other guys who had shown interest in Carmen, and he had no desire to jeopardize the most important friendship in his life. Carmen seemed equally aware of the delicate situation. She was friendly and engaging with Marcus, but she maintained a careful distance that suggested she understood the complications their growing attraction might create. When other employees made jokes about the amount of time they spent together, Carmen would redirect the conversation or find reasons to work in different areas of the station. The tension became more apparent during the station's weekly staff meetings. Danny would position himself between Marcus and Carmen, unconsciously creating a barrier that everyone noticed but no one mentioned. Marcus began to observe how protective Danny was of his sister, how he would change the subject when other male employees mentioned her, and how he had quietly discouraged previous attempts by local guys to ask her out. One evening, as Marcus was preparing for his overnight shift, he overheard a conversation between Carmen and one of the female interns. Carmen was explaining that she had turned down a date with a guy from her college because she was not interested in dating anyone at the moment. Marcus felt a complex mixture of relief and disappointment. Relief that she was not seeing anyone else, but disappointment that she seemed to be closing herself off from romantic possibilities entirely. The situation became more complicated when Marcus began to notice that Carmen was staying later at the station, often working until his shift began. She would bring dinner and eat in the break room while he prepared for his show, and they would engage in conversations that grew increasingly personal. Carmen told him about her dreams of working in media, about the books that had shaped her worldview, and about her complex relationship with her family's expectations. Marcus found himself sharing stories he had never told anyone, including Danny. He talked about his fears of being trapped in their small town forever, about his dreams of working for a major radio station in a bigger city, and about the loneliness that came with being the voice that everyone trusted, but no one really knew. Carmen listened with an intensity that made him feel truly heard for the first time in his life. As the summer progressed, their friendship deepened in ways that felt both natural and dangerous. They developed inside jokes, shared meaningful glances across the station, and created a private world of shared references and mutual understanding. But the specter of Danny's disapproval hung over every interaction, creating an undercurrent of tension that neither of them knew how to address. The situation reached a breaking point during a particularly busy afternoon when the station was preparing for a remote broadcast from the local county fair. Carmen had volunteered to help coordinate the event, and Marcus was scheduled to host a live show from the fairgrounds. As they worked together to load equipment into the station's van, their hands accidentally touched while reaching for the same box. The moment of contact sent an electric current through both of them, and they found themselves standing closer than propriety would normally allow. Danny appeared in the doorway at that exact moment, and Marcus could see the suspicion flash across his friend's face. The rest of the afternoon was marked by an uncomfortable tension that made everyone involved question what they had witnessed and what it might mean for the carefully maintained balance of their professional and personal relationships. The tension is building. How do you think Danny will react to what he's starting to notice? Subscribe to 80s Histories to see how this love triangle develops. Chapter 3. Crossed Wires. The county fair broadcast marked a turning point in the delicate dynamics that had been building at the radio station. Marcus spent the entire event hyper-aware of Danny's watchful presence, while Carmen threw herself into her coordination duties with an intensity that suggested she was trying to avoid any situation that might create additional awkwardness. The fair itself was a quintessential small-town celebration, complete with carnival rides that had seen better decades, food booths serving everything from funnel cakes to corn dogs, and a main stage where local bands would perform throughout the weekend. The radio station had set up a booth near the entrance, with a small broadcast setup that would allow Marcus to host his show live from the fairgrounds. As the afternoon progressed, Marcus found himself caught between his professional responsibilities and his growing awareness of Carmen's presence. She had volunteered to help manage the crowd of teenagers who had gathered around the radio booth, and she handled the chaos with a competence that impressed everyone who witnessed it. She seemed to instinctively understand how to engage with the listeners, how to make them feel included in the broadcast experience, and how to create the kind of energy that made for compelling radio. Danny, meanwhile, had appointed himself as an unofficial supervisor of the entire operation. He hovered near the broadcast booth, ostensibly helping with technical issues, but actually monitoring every interaction between Marcus and Carmen. His protective instincts were clearly activated, and he made several pointed comments about maintaining professional boundaries during live broadcasts. The situation became more complex when Carmen suggested that Marcus interview some of the local teenagers about their summer plans and their favorite music. Her idea was brilliant. It would create engaging content while also making the listeners feel like active participants in the show. But executing the plan required Carmen and Marcus to work closely together, coordinating interviews and managing the flow of the broadcast in real time. As they worked, Marcus became increasingly aware of Carmen's natural radio instincts. She had an intuitive understanding of pacing, timing, and audience engagement that many professional broadcasters never developed. When a nervous teenager struggled to answer Marcus's questions, Carmen would quietly provide encouraging prompts that helped the interview flow naturally. When the crowd around the booth grew too large, she would manage the situation without disrupting the broadcast. The chemistry between them was undeniable, and it translated into a radio show that crackled with energy and authenticity. Listeners who called in commented on how much they enjoyed the dynamic between Marcus and his mysterious assistant, and several people asked if Carmen would be joining future broadcasts. Marcus found himself hoping that she would, while simultaneously knowing that such a collaboration would only intensify the complications they were already facing. The evening's main event was a dance that would be held in the fair's main pavilion, with music provided by both live bands and DJ sets from the radio station. Marcus was scheduled to provide music during the breaks between live performances, and Carmen had volunteered to help coordinate the evening's entertainment. The prospect of working together during a dance created a new level of tension that none of them had anticipated. As the sun set and the fair's lights began to twinkle against the darkening sky, Marcus prepared for what he knew would be a challenging evening. The dance would feature slow songs that were designed to bring couples together, and he would be forced to watch Carmen from his DJ booth while knowing that he could not act on the feelings that had been building between them. Danny had made plans to attend the dance with a group of friends, and he had specifically mentioned that he would be keeping an eye on Carmen to make sure she was safe in the crowded pavilion. His protective instincts were clearly in overdrive, and Marcus could see that any attempt to ask Carmen to dance would be met with immediate and probably public resistance. Carmen, for her part, seemed to be struggling with her own conflicted feelings. She had been quieter than usual during the evening's preparations, and Marcus had caught her watching him with an expression that suggested she was wrestling with thoughts she could not voice. When their eyes met across the crowded pavilion, the connection between them was so intense that Marcus felt certain everyone around them must have noticed. The first set of live music began with an energetic rock band that had the dance floor packed with teenagers jumping and singing along. Carmen moved through the crowd with practiced ease, solving problems and coordinating with the band members while Marcus watched from his position behind the DJ booth. She seemed to glow under the colored lights, and Marcus found himself counting the minutes until the band's set would end and he would take over the music. The dance is about to begin, and the tension is reaching its peak. What do you think will happen when the slow songs start playing? Don't forget to subscribe to 80s Histories to see how this romantic drama unfolds. Chapter 4. The Right Frequency. The moment Marcus had been both anticipating and dreading arrived as the live band finished their final song and the crowd turned expectantly toward the DJ booth. He had prepared a carefully curated playlist that would transition from the high-energy rock music to the slower, more intimate songs that would define the evening's romantic atmosphere. His hands trembled slightly as he queued up the first track, knowing that the next few hours would test the boundaries of the situation he had been navigating all summer. Carmen had positioned herself near the edge of the dance floor, ostensibly to coordinate with the lighting technician, but actually to maintain a clear view of the DJ booth. She wore a sundress that Marcus had never seen before, something flowing and feminine that caught the colored lights as she moved. Her hair was pulled back in a way that revealed the elegant line of her neck, and Marcus found himself struggling to concentrate on the technical aspects of his job. The first slow song began with the opening notes of a ballad that had been dominating the radio charts all summer. Couples throughout the pavilion moved toward each other with the practiced ease of people who had been dancing together all their lives. Marcus watched as Danny approached a girl he had been dating casually, and he felt a moment of hope that his friend's attention might be occupied elsewhere for at least a few minutes. Carmen remained at the edge of the dance floor, swaying slightly to the music, but clearly not planning to dance with anyone. Marcus could see several local guys looking in her direction, but none of them seemed willing to approach her while Danny was in the vicinity. The unspoken protection that surrounded Carmen had become so well established that it operated even when Danny was not actively enforcing it. As the song progressed, Marcus found himself making a decision that surprised him with its suddenness. He had spent weeks analyzing the situation, weighing the potential consequences, and convincing himself that pursuing Carmen would be impossible. But watching her stand alone at the edge of the dance floor, clearly wanting to participate but held back by circumstances beyond her control, Marcus realized that some risks were worth taking. He activated the automatic playlist system that would keep the music playing without his direct intervention, and he stepped down from the DJ booth for the first time that evening. The walk across the pavilion seemed to take forever, and Marcus was acutely aware of the curious looks from people who knew him as the voice behind the microphone, rather than as someone who participated in the events he soundtracked. Carmen looked up as he approached, and Marcus could see surprise and anticipation warring in her expression. She had clearly not expected him to leave his post, and she seemed to understand immediately what his presence meant. The current song was reaching its conclusion, and Marcus knew that he had only a few seconds to make his request before the next track began. He extended his hand toward Carmen with a gesture that was both formal and intimate, an invitation that acknowledged the gravity of what he was asking. The next song began with a gentle piano introduction that Marcus had selected specifically for its romantic atmosphere, and he realized that he was about to dance with Carmen to music that he had chosen, creating a moment that would be entirely of his own making. Carmen hesitated for just a moment, her eyes scanning the crowd as if calculating the potential consequences of accepting his invitation. Marcus could see her locate Danny across the pavilion, still dancing with his date, but clearly aware of what was happening. The tension in the air was palpable, and Marcus realized that everyone in their immediate vicinity was watching to see what would happen next. When Carmen placed her hand in his, Marcus felt a jolt of electricity that seemed to travel through his entire body. She stepped closer to him, and they began to move together with a natural rhythm that suggested they had been dancing together for years, rather than experiencing their first dance. The music seemed to wrap around them, creating a private world where only they existed. The song was perfect, romantic without being overly sentimental, with a melody that built gradually toward an emotional crescendo that matched the intensity of their connection. Marcus had chosen it weeks earlier, hoping for exactly this moment, but never quite believing that it would actually happen. Now, as he held Carmen in his arms and felt her body responding to his lead, he realized that all the careful planning and cautious hoping had been worth it. As they danced, Marcus became aware of the reactions from the people around them. Some of the station employees were smiling knowingly, as if they had been waiting for this moment all summer. Other couples on the dance floor seemed to sense the significance of what they were witnessing, and several people had stopped their own dancing to watch Marcus and Carmen move together. But most importantly, Marcus could feel Danny's eyes on them from across the pavilion. His friend had stopped dancing entirely and was staring at them with an expression that Marcus could not quite read. There was surprise there, certainly, but also something that might have been resignation, as if Danny had been expecting this moment even while dreading it. The song built toward its climax, and Marcus pulled Carmen slightly closer, feeling her breath against his neck and the warmth of her body against his. For these few minutes, all the complications and obstacles seemed to fade away, leaving only the music, the dancing, and the undeniable connection that had been building between them all summer. This was the moment that would change everything, and Marcus knew that whatever happened next, he would never regret having asked Carmen Rodriguez for this first slow dance. The dance is finally happening, the moment we've all been waiting for. But how will Danny react? Subscribe to 80s Histories to continue following this romantic journey through the summer of '83. Chapter 5. Frequency Clash. The aftermath of the first dance created ripples that spread through the small radio station community like waves from a stone dropped in still water. Marcus returned to his DJ booth with Carmen's perfume still lingering in his memory, and the feeling of her hand in his burned into his consciousness. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of music and stolen glances, but the real reckoning would come the following Monday when normal routines resumed. Danny's reaction had been more complex than Marcus had anticipated. Instead of the immediate confrontation he had feared, his friend had maintained a studied silence that somehow felt more ominous than outright anger. Danny had finished the evening's dance with forced normalcy, but Marcus could see the tension in his shoulders and the way he avoided eye contact whenever their paths crossed. Carmen had seemed equally affected by the evening's events. She had returned to her coordination duties with renewed focus, but Marcus noticed that she moved differently now, with a self-consciousness that suggested she was hyper-aware of being watched. When the dance ended and the equipment needed to be packed away, she had worked with methodical efficiency while carefully avoiding any situation that might put her alone with Marcus. The Monday morning that followed brought an atmosphere to the station that felt charged with unspoken tensions. Carmen arrived at her usual time, but instead of her typical cheerful greeting to the staff, she moved directly to her work area and began organizing records with an intensity that suggested she was trying to lose herself in the familiar task. Marcus watched her from his booth, noting the way she kept her eyes focused on her work rather than looking up at the glass partition that separated them. Danny arrived an hour later than usual, and his demeanor immediately signaled that the careful balance they had maintained throughout the summer was about to shift dramatically. He moved through the station with the purposeful stride of someone who had spent the weekend making difficult decisions, and Marcus felt his stomach tighten as he watched his best friend approach the DJ booth. The conversation that followed was conducted in the low, intense tones that men use when they are trying to resolve serious disagreements without creating a public scene. Danny positioned himself so that his back was to the main floor, effectively blocking anyone else from seeing Marcus's reactions to whatever he was about to say. His words were carefully chosen but delivered with an underlying firmness that left no room for misinterpretation. Danny explained that he had always known this moment might come, but that knowing and accepting were two different things entirely. He talked about the responsibility he felt for his sister's well-being, about the promises he had made to his parents, and about the complex dynamics of friendship that Marcus was asking him to navigate. His voice carried the weight of someone who was trying to balance competing loyalties while maintaining his integrity. Marcus found himself in the impossible position of defending feelings that he had never intended to develop, while simultaneously trying to preserve the friendship that had been central to his life for years. He attempted to explain that his interest in Carmen was not casual or disrespectful, that he understood the seriousness of the situation, and that he would never do anything to hurt her or damage their family relationships. The conversation revealed depths of complexity that neither young man had fully considered. Danny's protectiveness toward Carmen was rooted in experiences and family dynamics that Marcus had never fully understood, while Marcus's feelings for Carmen represented a challenge to assumptions about friendship and loyalty that Danny had never been forced to examine. As they talked, both men began to realize that they were dealing with a situation that had no clear precedents in their experience. The easy camaraderie of their friendship had been built on shared interests and mutual respect, but it had never been tested by competing claims on something as fundamental as romantic attachment. They were essentially creating new rules for their relationship while trying to maintain the connection that had sustained them both. The discussion was interrupted by the arrival of the station manager, who needed Marcus to prepare for his morning show. Danny retreated to his usual duties, but the conversation had established new parameters for their interaction that would affect everyone at the station. Marcus began his show with a distracted energy that regular listeners would probably notice, while Danny moved through his tasks with the careful deliberation of someone who was still processing a significant decision. Carmen seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere without having witnessed the conversation between Marcus and Danny. She continued her work with the same focused intensity, but Marcus noticed that she had positioned herself so that she could observe both men without appearing to do so. Her intelligence and emotional intuition had always impressed him, and now he could see that she was reading the situation with the same careful attention she brought to everything else. The remainder of the morning passed with an undercurrent of tension that affected everyone in the station. The usual casual interactions between staff members became more formal, and several people commented on the unusual atmosphere without being able to identify its source. Marcus found himself making mistakes during his show that he had not made since his first weeks on the job, while Danny's typically easy rapport with the other employees seemed strained. As lunchtime approached, Marcus realized that the events of the previous evening had set in motion a series of changes that would fundamentally alter the dynamics of his professional and personal life. The simple act of asking Carmen to dance had revealed complexities and complications that none of them had been prepared to handle, and the path forward was no longer clear for anyone involved. The confrontation has begun. How will this friendship survive the test of love? Subscribe to 80s Histories to see how Marcus and Danny navigate this complicated situation. Chapter 6. Signal Interference. The tension that had been building since the dance reached a new level of complexity as the week progressed. Carmen had apparently decided that the best way to handle the situation was to minimize her interactions with both Marcus and Danny, focusing instead on completing her summer project with an efficiency that impressed everyone but addressed none of the underlying emotional issues that were affecting the entire station. Marcus found himself caught in an impossible position. His friendship with Danny had been strained but not broken, existing now in a state of careful politeness that felt more exhausting than outright conflict might have been. They continued to work together professionally, but the easy camaraderie that had defined their relationship was replaced by a formal courtesy that made every interaction feel like a negotiation. The situation became more complicated when Carmen began staying later at the station, working on her catalog project during hours when fewer people were around. Marcus initially assumed that she was trying to avoid the awkwardness of the daytime dynamics, but he gradually realized that her schedule was coinciding with his evening show preparations in ways that seemed too deliberate to be accidental. Their first real conversation since the dance occurred on a Thursday evening when Carmen was working alone in the record library while Marcus prepared for his overnight shift. The station was quieter than usual, with only the overnight technician and a few cleaning staff providing distant background activity. Carmen looked up from her work as Marcus entered the library to select music for his show, and for the first time since the dance, they were alone together without the buffer of other people or professional obligations. The conversation that followed was marked by the kind of careful honesty that develops between people who have been forced to confront feelings they had been trying to ignore. Carmen spoke about the difficulty of navigating her family's expectations while trying to maintain her own sense of independence and autonomy. She explained that her relationship with Danny was complicated by their parents' traditional values and their assumption that Danny would always be responsible for protecting her reputation and well-being. Marcus found himself sharing thoughts and feelings that he had never articulated, even to himself. He talked about the isolation of his work, how the intimacy of radio created connections with listeners that somehow made his real-life relationships more difficult to navigate. He explained that his friendship with Danny had been one of the few constants in his life, and that the prospect of losing it felt almost as frightening as the possibility of never exploring his feelings for Carmen. As they talked, both of them began to understand that their situation was more complex than a simple case of romantic attraction complicated by family loyalty. They were dealing with questions about independence, responsibility, and the ways that small-town social dynamics could limit individual choices. Carmen's intelligence and Marcus's emotional depth created a connection that transcended the immediate complications of their circumstances. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Danny, who had returned to the station to retrieve something he had forgotten. Finding Marcus and Carmen alone together, engaged in what was clearly an intimate conversation, triggered a reaction that had been building since the dance. Danny's carefully maintained composure finally cracked, and the confrontation that had been brewing all week finally erupted. The argument that followed revealed the full complexity of the situation they were all facing. Danny's anger was not simply about his sister's romantic life, but about feeling excluded from a relationship that had been central to his identity. Marcus's frustration was not just about romantic obstacles, but about the ways that loyalty and friendship could become constraints on personal growth. Carmen's intervention was not just about defending her right to make her own choices, but about challenging the assumptions that had defined her family relationships. The three of them found themselves engaged in a discussion that went far beyond the immediate question of whether Marcus and Carmen should be allowed to pursue their obvious attraction. They were essentially negotiating new definitions of friendship, family responsibility, and individual autonomy that would affect all of their relationships going forward. Carmen surprised both men by taking control of the conversation with a directness that revealed strengths they had not fully recognized. She spoke about her frustration with being treated as someone who needed protection rather than someone who was capable of making her own decisions. She challenged Danny's assumptions about her vulnerability while simultaneously acknowledging the love and concern that motivated his protectiveness. Her words had the effect of forcing both Marcus and Danny to examine their own motivations and assumptions. Marcus realized that his pursuit of Carmen had been influenced by his own need to prove something about his maturity and independence, while Danny began to understand that his protectiveness was partly rooted in his own fear of losing his central role in his sister's life. The conversation ended without clear resolution, but it established new parameters for their relationships that acknowledged the complexity of their situation. Danny did not give his blessing to Marcus's pursuit of Carmen, but he also did not issue the ultimatum that Marcus had feared. Carmen made it clear that she would not be constrained by other people's opinions about her choices, but she also acknowledged the legitimate concerns that were motivating the people who cared about her. As the evening progressed and Marcus began his overnight show, he found himself with a new understanding of the situation he was navigating. The simple attraction he had felt for Carmen had evolved into something more complex and potentially more meaningful, but it had also revealed the ways that personal relationships could challenge fundamental assumptions about loyalty, responsibility, and independence. The truth is finally coming out. All three of them are learning what it really means to grow up and make difficult choices. Subscribe to 80s Histories to see how this emotional confrontation changes everything. Chapter 7. Finding the Right Channel. The weekend that followed the three-way confrontation brought an unexpected shift in the dynamics that had been consuming the radio station all summer. Instead of the continued tension that Marcus had expected, Saturday morning arrived with a sense of cautious possibility that none of them had anticipated. Carmen appeared at the station earlier than usual, but instead of immediately diving into her work, she lingered in the main area with an air of someone who had made an important decision. Danny arrived shortly after Carmen, and Marcus observed from his booth as the siblings engaged in what appeared to be a serious but not hostile conversation. Their body language suggested a discussion that was both intimate and resolved, lacking the defensive postures that had characterized their interactions since the dance. Marcus felt a mixture of hope and anxiety as he watched them talk, knowing that whatever they were discussing would probably determine the direction of all their relationships. The conversation between Carmen and Danny lasted nearly an hour, during which Marcus attempted to maintain his professional focus while remaining acutely aware of every gesture and expression he could observe through the booth's glass partition. When the discussion concluded, both siblings seemed more relaxed than they had been in weeks, and Carmen looked up at the DJ booth with an expression that Marcus interpreted as an invitation. The conversation that followed, conducted through the booth's intercom system with Danny, listening from his position at the main console, represented a new level of honesty and maturity from all three participants. Carmen had apparently spent the weekend thinking about the previous evening's confrontation, and she had reached conclusions that surprised everyone involved. She explained that her conversation with Danny had helped her understand that her frustration with his protectiveness was partly rooted in her own uncertainty about her feelings and her readiness for a serious relationship. She had been using his interference as an excuse to avoid making decisions about her own emotional life, and she realized that she needed to take responsibility for her own choices rather than blaming external obstacles. Carmen's newfound clarity had apparently helped Danny understand that his protectiveness was preventing him from seeing his sister as the capable adult she had become. Their conversation had allowed them to establish new boundaries that acknowledged Carmen's independence while maintaining the close relationship that had always defined their sibling bond. The implications for Marcus were both encouraging and challenging. Carmen's decision to take control of her own romantic life meant that the obstacle of Danny's disapproval was no longer the primary barrier to their relationship. However, It also meant that Marcus would need to prove himself worthy of Carmen's trust and affection based on his own merits rather than simply overcoming external opposition. The new dynamic was tested that same afternoon when Carmen asked Marcus to join her for lunch at the diner across the street from the station. The invitation was issued casually, in full view of Danny and the other staff members, but its significance was not lost on anyone. This would be their first public appearance together as something more than colleagues, and the entire station would be watching to see how they handled the transition. The lunch itself was a revelation for both of them. Away from the familiar environment of the radio station, they were able to talk without the constant awareness of being observed and analyzed. Carmen revealed depths of ambition and intelligence that impressed Marcus even more than her obvious beauty and charm. She spoke about her plans for the future, her hopes for a career in media, and her dreams of using communication to bridge the gaps between different communities. Marcus found himself sharing his own hopes and fears with an honesty that surprised him. He talked about his frustration with the limitations of small-town radio, his dreams of reaching larger audiences, and his fear that he might never find work that felt as meaningful as the late-night connections he made with troubled teenagers who called the station. Carmen listened with the same intensity she brought to everything else, and her responses revealed an understanding of his work that went beyond simple support. As they talked, both of them began to realize that their attraction was based on much more than physical chemistry or romantic fantasy. They shared similar values, complementary strengths, and a vision of the future that could potentially accommodate both of their ambitions. The conversation revealed possibilities for partnership that extended far beyond the immediate question of whether they would date. The return to the station marked another milestone in their evolving relationship. Instead of the careful distance that had characterized their interactions since the dance, they now moved through the workplace with the easy familiarity of people who had established a new understanding. Danny observed their changed dynamic with what appeared to be grudging approval, and the other staff members seemed to sense that the weeks of tension had finally reached some kind of resolution. The afternoon brought a new test when Carmen volunteered to help Marcus with his show preparation, working directly in the DJ booth for the first time since her arrival at the station. The intimate space that had been Marcus's private domain suddenly felt transformed by her presence, and he found himself hyper-aware of every movement and gesture as they worked together to organize the evening's playlist. The chemistry between them was undeniable, but it was now tempered by a deeper understanding of what they were building together. Carmen's insights about music programming challenged Marcus to think more creatively about his show, while her natural radio instincts suggested possibilities for collaboration that could benefit both of their careers. They were no longer just attracted to each other, they were beginning to function as a team. As the sun set and Marcus prepared to begin his evening show, he realized that the events of the past few weeks had fundamentally changed not just his relationship with Carmen, but his understanding of what he wanted from his life and career. The simple attraction that had started with asking her to dance had evolved into something that felt like the beginning of a true partnership, both personal and professional. Finally, the three of them are learning to communicate like adults, but can Marcus and Carmen's relationship survive the transition from workplace attraction to something real? Subscribe to 80s Histories to see how this summer romance continues to develop. Chapter 8: Perfect Harmony. The transformation in the station's atmosphere was immediate and profound. With the primary sources of tension resolved, Carmen and Marcus began to explore their relationship with the enthusiasm of people who had been holding back their true feelings for too long. Their collaboration extended beyond the immediate requirements of their work, as Carmen began contributing ideas for Marcus's show that drew on her academic background and her intuitive understanding of their audience. The first major test of their new dynamic came when Carmen suggested that Marcus interview her for a segment about the changing role of women in media. The idea was ambitious and potentially controversial for their small-town audience, but Carmen's intelligence and Marcus's interviewing skills created a conversation that was both engaging and thought-provoking. The positive response from listeners validated their instinct that their audience was ready for more substantial content than the typical rock and roll programming. Danny's adjustment to the new reality proved easier than any of them had anticipated. Once he had accepted that Carmen was capable of making her own decisions, he seemed to genuinely appreciate Marcus's respectful approach to their relationship. The friendship between the two men evolved into something more mature and complex, based on mutual respect rather than the unexamined assumptions that had defined their earlier connection. The success of Carmen's on-air appearance led to additional opportunities for collaboration. Marcus began featuring her as a regular contributor to his show, creating segments that showcased her knowledge of music history and her insights into the cultural significance of popular songs. Their on-air chemistry was undeniable, and listener response was overwhelmingly positive, with many people calling to request more content featuring both of them. The professional success of their partnership began to create possibilities that none of them had anticipated. The station manager, impressed by the quality of their collaborative work and the positive audience response, began discussing the possibility of giving them their own show. The prospect of co-hosting a program together represented both an exciting opportunity and a new level of commitment to their relationship. Carmen's summer project was nearing completion, and the comprehensive catalog she had created impressed everyone who saw it. Her work had not only organized the station's music library, but had also revealed gaps in their collection that could be addressed to improve programming quality. The project had evolved from a simple filing system into a strategic analysis of the station's strengths and opportunities for growth. As August arrived, bringing with it the awareness that Carmen would soon return to college, both she and Marcus began to confront the reality that their relationship would need to survive the challenge of separation. Carmen's final year of college would require her to complete an internship and write a thesis, while Marcus's career at the station was reaching a point where he needed to decide whether to commit to staying in their small town or pursue opportunities in larger markets. The conversation about their future took place during a late-night walk through the downtown area that had become the backdrop for their summer romance. The neon signs and empty streets created an atmosphere of intimacy and possibility, while the distant sound of music from the local bars reminded them of the community that had brought them together. Carmen spoke about her plans for the future with a clarity that impressed Marcus, while he shared his own uncertainties about career and location with the honesty that had become characteristic of their relationship. The discussion revealed that both of them were facing similar questions about the balance between personal relationships and professional ambitions. Carmen's dreams of working in media would likely require her to move to a larger city, while Marcus's aspirations for radio success might demand similar geographic flexibility. The challenge was not simply maintaining their relationship across distance, but coordinating their individual growth in ways that would allow them to build a life together. The solution they developed was both practical and romantic, reflecting the combination of intelligence and emotion that had defined their connection from the beginning. Carmen proposed that they spend her final year of college exploring opportunities that would allow them to work together professionally while building their personal relationship. Marcus's experience and Carmen's education could complement each other in ways that would benefit both of their careers. The conversation concluded with a level of commitment that surprised both of them with its seriousness. What had begun as a summer attraction had evolved into a partnership that encompassed both personal and professional dimensions. They were no longer just dating, they were planning a future together that acknowledged both their individual ambitions and their shared values. The final weeks of summer took on a bittersweet quality as Carmen prepared to return to college, and Marcus faced the prospect of returning to his solitary evening shows. However, the relationship they had built was strong enough to withstand the challenges of separation, and their plans for the future provided a sense of direction that neither of them had possessed at the beginning of the summer. The station's farewell party for Carmen became a celebration of everything she had accomplished during her time there. Her catalog project had transformed the station's operations. Her on-air contributions had elevated the quality of programming, and her presence had created a more collaborative and creative work environment. But perhaps most importantly, her relationship with Marcus had demonstrated that professional partnerships and personal connections could enhance each other rather than compete for attention. As the summer of 1983 drew to a close, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since that first morning when he had noticed Carmen organizing records in the station's main area. The simple act of asking her to dance had initiated a series of changes that had affected not just his romantic life, but his understanding of friendship, his approach to his career, and his vision of what he wanted from his future. The summer is coming to an end, but Marcus and Carmen have found something that will last much longer. How will their relationship survive the challenges ahead? Subscribe to 80s Histories to see how this love story reaches its beautiful conclusion. Chapter 9. Long-Distance Connection. September arrived with the crisp promise of autumn and the reality of Carmen's return to college. The 2-hour drive between Cedar Falls and the State University felt like an insurmountable distance after a summer of daily interaction. But Marcus and Carmen approached the challenge with the same determination they had brought to navigating the complications of their workplace romance. Their first test came during Carmen's initial week back at school, when the demands of her final year coursework threatened to overwhelm the carefully maintained communication schedule they had established. Marcus found himself calling the dormitory phone at predetermined times, hoping to catch Carmen between classes and study sessions. The crackling long-distance connection and the constant interruptions from Carmen's roommate created a frustrating barrier to the intimate conversations they had grown accustomed to sharing. The solution came from an unexpected source. Danny, who had been quietly observing his sister's struggle to balance her academic responsibilities with her desire to maintain her relationship with Marcus, suggested that the radio station could provide a more reliable means of communication. Marcus's evening show reached the university campus clearly, and Carmen could listen from her dormitory room while completing her coursework. The innovation they developed was both romantic and practical. Marcus began dedicating specific segments of his show to Carmen, playing songs that held special meaning for their relationship and sharing coded messages that only she would understand. Carmen, in turn, would call the station during predetermined breaks in the programming, creating brief conversations that felt intimate despite being broadcast to the entire listening area. The arrangement worked better than either of them had anticipated. Marcus's show gained a new dimension of warmth and personality as listeners became invested in his long-distance relationship, while Carmen's regular call-ins provided content that was both entertaining and emotionally genuine. The station manager, recognizing the popularity of their radio romance, began promoting the segments as a regular feature of the evening programming. Carmen's academic work began to reflect the influence of her summer experience at the radio station. Her thesis project evolved into a comprehensive study of small-town radio's role in community building, using Marcus's show as a primary case study. The research required her to analyze hours of programming, interview listeners, and examine the ways that radio could create connections between people who might never meet face-to-face. The project provided Carmen with a legitimate reason to spend time at the station during her weekend visits home, and her research revealed aspects of Marcus's work that even he had not fully appreciated. The late-night callers who confided in him represented a network of lonely and struggling people who found genuine comfort in his voice and his willingness to listen. Carmen's analysis demonstrated that Marcus was providing a form of community service that went far beyond entertainment. The academic recognition of his work gave Marcus a new perspective on his career and his future possibilities. Carmen's research suggested that his skills could be valuable in markets beyond their small town, and her analysis of his programming revealed strengths that he had never considered professionally significant. The validation was both encouraging and challenging, as it forced him to consider whether he was ready to pursue opportunities that would require him to leave the familiar environment of Cedar Falls. The question of their future together became more complex as both of them began to explore possibilities that had seemed impossible at the beginning of the summer. Carmen's thesis advisor, impressed by her work, suggested that she consider pursuing graduate studies in communications, while Marcus received an unexpected inquiry from a larger station that had been monitoring his work. The opportunities were exciting but geographically scattered, requiring them to coordinate their individual ambitions in ways that would allow them to build a life together. The conversation about their future took place during Carmen's October visit home, as they walked through the downtown area that had become the backdrop for their relationship. The autumn leaves and the cool evening air created an atmosphere of transition and possibility, while the familiar neon signs reminded them of the community that had brought them together. They talked about their individual dreams and the ways that their relationship had changed their understanding of what they wanted from their lives. The discussion revealed that both of them had been influenced by their summer experience in ways that extended beyond their romantic connection. Carmen's time at the radio station had convinced her that she wanted to work in broadcasting, while Marcus's relationship with Carmen had shown him the importance of finding work that felt meaningful and collaborative. Their individual growth had created possibilities for partnership that were both personal and professional. The solution they developed was ambitious but realistic, reflecting the combination of intelligence and determination that had defined their relationship from the beginning. Carmen proposed that they spend her final semester developing a plan that would allow them to work together professionally after her graduation. Marcus's experience and Carmen's education could complement each other in ways that would benefit both of their careers, whether in radio, television, or other forms of media. The conversation concluded with a level of commitment that reflected the maturity their relationship had achieved. They were no longer just dating. They were planning a future together that acknowledged both their individual ambitions and their shared values. The challenges of distance and career uncertainty had strengthened their connection rather than weakening it, and they approached the remaining months of separation with confidence and purpose. As October progressed, Marcus found himself approaching his work with renewed energy and focus. The prospect of eventually collaborating with Carmen professionally had given him new ideas for programming, and the success of their radio segments had demonstrated that their partnership had commercial as well as personal potential. The station manager had begun discussing the possibility of offering them both permanent positions after Carmen's graduation, a prospect that would solve many of their logistical challenges while allowing them to build their careers together. Distance is testing their love, but Marcus and Carmen are finding creative ways to stay connected. Will their relationship survive the challenges of separation? Subscribe to 80s Histories to see how their radio romance continues to evolve. Chapter 10. Static and Clarity. November brought unexpected challenges that tested the strength of Marcus and Carmen's relationship in ways that neither distance nor career uncertainty had managed to do. The comfortable routine they had established began to fracture when Carmen's academic workload intensified and Marcus faced pressure from the station to consider a job offer from a larger market that would require him to make an immediate decision. The complications began when Carmen's thesis advisor suggested that she apply for a competitive internship at a major television station in Chicago. The opportunity would provide valuable experience and potentially lead to a full-time position after graduation. But it would also require her to spend her final semester away from both the university and Cedar Falls. The prospect of even greater distance between them created a new source of tension in their relationship. Marcus learned about the internship opportunity during one of their scheduled phone calls, and his initial reaction revealed insecurities that had been building throughout the months of separation. The possibility that Carmen might pursue opportunities that would take her even further away triggered fears about the sustainability of their relationship and the reality of their different life trajectories. The conversation that followed was their first serious disagreement, marked by frustrations that had been accumulating despite their best efforts to maintain connection. The argument centered on questions of commitment and sacrifice that neither of them had been forced to confront directly. Carmen felt that Marcus was asking her to limit her professional opportunities for the sake of their relationship, while Marcus believed that Carmen was prioritizing her career advancement over their shared plans for the future. The disagreement revealed tensions that had been masked by the romance of their long-distance communication and the excitement of their professional collaboration. The resolution came through an unexpected source. Danny, who had been observing the strain in both Marcus and Carmen's behavior during her increasingly infrequent visits home, intervened with a directness that surprised both of them. His perspective as someone who cared about both individuals but was not directly involved in their relationship allowed him to see aspects of their situation that they had been too close to recognize. Danny's analysis was both supportive and challenging. He pointed out that Marcus and Carmen had been so focused on maintaining their relationship despite the obstacles that they had stopped communicating about their individual fears and ambitions. The radio segments and scheduled phone calls had become performance pieces rather than genuine conversations, and both of them were trying to present idealized versions of themselves rather than dealing with the real challenges they were facing. The intervention forced Marcus and Carmen to have the honest conversation about their future that they had been avoiding. Carmen explained that her interest in the Chicago internship was not about choosing career over relationship, but about ensuring that she would have the skills and experience necessary to be a true partner in their professional collaboration. Marcus acknowledged that his resistance to her opportunity was rooted in his own insecurities about whether he was ambitious enough to match her drive and intelligence. The conversation revealed that both of them had been struggling with questions about their individual worth and their readiness for the kind of partnership they had been planning. Carmen worried that her academic success might intimidate Marcus, while Marcus feared that his small-town background would limit his ability to compete in larger markets. The months of separation had allowed these insecurities to grow, rather than bringing them closer together. The breakthrough came when they realized that their individual growth during the months apart had actually strengthened their potential for partnership rather than threatening it. Carmen's academic work had given her insights into the broadcasting industry that would benefit both of their careers, while Marcus's continued development as a radio personality had demonstrated his ability to connect with audiences in ways that would be valuable in any market. The solution they developed was both practical and romantic. Carmen would apply for the Chicago internship, but she would also work with Marcus to develop a portfolio of their collaborative work that could be presented to potential employers as a package deal. The radio segments that had sustained their relationship could also serve as evidence of their professional chemistry and their ability to create compelling content together. The decision represented a new level of maturity in their relationship, acknowledging that their individual success would ultimately benefit their partnership rather than competing with it. The months of separation had taught them that their connection was strong enough to survive challenges and that their shared values were more important than geographic proximity. Marcus's response to the station manager's job offer reflected his new understanding of his relationship with Carmen and his own career goals. Instead of accepting the position immediately, he negotiated a delayed start date that would allow him to explore opportunities that might accommodate both his career advancement and his plans with Carmen. The station manager, impressed by Marcus's professional development and his collaborative work with Carmen, agreed to the arrangement. The November that had begun with crisis and uncertainty concluded with renewed confidence and purpose. Marcus and Carmen had learned to navigate the challenges of distance and career pressure without sacrificing their individual growth or their shared dreams. The relationship that had begun with a simple dance had evolved into a partnership that could accommodate ambition, uncertainty, and the complex realities of adult life. As Thanksgiving approached, both Marcus and Carmen looked forward to Carmen's extended visit home with an anticipation that felt different from their previous reunions. They would be together not just as lovers dealing with separation, but as partners who had successfully navigated serious challenges and emerged with a stronger understanding of their commitment to each other and their shared future. The relationship is being tested by real adult challenges, but Marcus and Carmen are proving that true love can overcome obstacles when both people are willing to grow. Subscribe to 80s Histories to see how their story continues to unfold. Chapter 11. The Right Frequency Returns. December arrived with the kind of crystalline winter weather that transforms small towns into postcard scenes, and Carmen's return for winter break brought with it a sense of completion and new beginning that both she and Marcus had been anticipating throughout the challenging months of separation. The radio station was decorated with modest holiday lights, and the familiar warmth of the building felt like a sanctuary where they could reconnect without the pressures that had complicated their recent communications. The reunion was different from their previous visits. Instead of the desperate intensity of lovers trying to compress weeks of separation into a few days, Marcus and Carmen approached their time together with the confidence of people who had successfully navigated serious challenges and emerged with a stronger understanding of their partnership. The months apart had provided them with individual experiences and growth that they could now share and integrate into their relationship. Carmen's internship application to Chicago had been successful, and she would begin working at the television station in January. The opportunity represented exactly the kind of professional development she had been seeking, but it also meant that their separation would continue for several more months. However, the conversations they had shared during November had prepared them both for this reality, and they approached the news with excitement rather than anxiety. Marcus had used the months of separation to develop new programming ideas that incorporated lessons learned from his collaboration with Carmen. His show had evolved to include more diverse musical selections, more substantive interviews with local figures, and regular segments that explored the cultural significance of popular music. The changes had been well received by listeners and had attracted attention from industry professionals who were beginning to recognize Marcus as a talent worth watching. The station manager had been monitoring Marcus's professional development with increasing interest, and he had begun discussing the possibility of expanding Marcus's role to include programming responsibilities that would utilize his growing expertise in audience engagement and content development. The opportunity would provide Marcus with valuable experience in media management while allowing him to remain in Cedar Falls until Carmen completed her internship. The most significant development was the formal proposal that Marcus and Carmen had been developing for their collaborative work. Carmen's academic research had provided them with a framework for understanding the impact of their radio segments, while Marcus's practical experience had given them insights into the technical and creative aspects of broadcasting. Together, they had created a comprehensive plan for a show that would combine entertainment with educational content in ways that could appeal to both local and regional audiences. The proposal was ambitious but realistic, reflecting the combination of academic rigor and practical experience that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. The show would feature music, interviews, and commentary that explored the connections between popular culture and social issues, with a particular focus on the experiences of young adults navigating the transition from adolescence to independence. Carmen's thesis work had provided them with research that supported the viability of their concept, while Marcus's track record at the station demonstrated his ability to maintain audience engagement over extended periods. The combination of their skills and perspectives had created a programming concept that was both innovative and commercially viable. The presentation of their proposal to the station manager took place during the week between Christmas and New Year's, when the station was operating with reduced staff and the atmosphere was relaxed enough to accommodate extended discussion. Marcus and Carmen had spent days preparing their materials, creating demo segments and audience analysis that demonstrated the potential success of their collaborative work. The station manager's response exceeded their expectations. He had been following their work throughout the summer and fall, and he had been impressed by the positive audience response to their collaborative segments. The proposal they presented aligned with his own vision for expanding the station's programming to include more diverse and substantive content, and he was prepared to offer them a trial period that would allow them to develop their concept while maintaining their individual responsibilities. The offer was both exciting and challenging. Carmen would need to complete her internship in Chicago before joining the station full-time, but she would be able to contribute to the show's development through remote collaboration during the spring semester. Marcus would take on additional responsibilities for content development and audience research, skills that would be valuable regardless of their future career paths. The decision to accept the offer represented a new level of commitment to their partnership and their shared vision for their careers. The show would be uniquely theirs, combining their individual strengths and perspectives in ways that neither of them could achieve alone. The opportunity would also provide them with the professional experience and industry connections that would be valuable for future advancement. As January approached and Carmen prepared to leave for Chicago, both of them felt a sense of anticipation rather than anxiety about the separation. The months apart had taught them that their relationship was strong enough to survive challenges and that their individual growth ultimately benefited their partnership. The internship would provide Carmen with experience and connections that would enhance their collaborative work, while Marcus's expanded role at the station would give him skills and responsibilities that would prepare him for future opportunities. The final week of December was spent in intensive preparation for the changes that would define the coming year. Carmen organized her research materials and created systems that would allow her to contribute to the show's development from Chicago, while Marcus worked with the station's technical staff to understand the equipment and procedures that would support their expanded programming. The New Year's Eve celebration at the station was modest but meaningful, with staff and friends gathering to mark the transition and to wish Carmen success in her internship. As midnight approached, Marcus and Carmen found themselves alone in the DJ booth where their collaboration had begun, surrounded by the equipment and records that had provided the soundtrack for their relationship. The kiss they shared as 1983 became 1984 was different from their first dance months earlier. It was not the tentative exploration of new attraction, but the confident expression of mature love that had been tested by challenges and had emerged stronger. The year ahead would bring new opportunities and new challenges, but they faced the future with the confidence of people who had learned to trust each other and themselves. A new year brings new opportunities. Marcus and Carmen are ready to take their partnership to the next level. Subscribe to 80s Histories to see how their love story reaches its beautiful conclusion. Chapter 12, Perfect Signal. The spring of 1984 brought a convergence of events that would define the future for Marcus, Carmen, and everyone who had been part of their journey. Carmen's internship at the Chicago television station had exceeded all expectations, providing her with experience in production, research, and on-air presentation that complemented her academic preparation perfectly. The skills she had developed during her months in the city, combined with her natural intelligence and communication abilities, had made her an invaluable asset to the station. Meanwhile, Marcus had grown into his expanded role at WKRP 103.7 with a confidence and creativity that impressed everyone who worked with him. The programming innovations he had developed during Carmen's absence had attracted attention from industry professionals throughout the region, and the station had received several inquiries about his availability for positions in larger markets. However, Marcus had made it clear that his future plans were contingent on Carmen's return and their ability to work together. The radio show they had been developing throughout the months of separation had evolved into something more sophisticated and ambitious than either of them had originally envisioned. Carmen's television experience had given her insights into visual storytelling and audience engagement that enhanced their audio work, while Marcus's continued development as a broadcaster had refined his interviewing skills and his ability to create compelling content under pressure. The pilot episodes they had produced during Carmen's spring break visits had generated enthusiastic responses from both listeners and industry professionals. The show's combination of music, interviews, and cultural commentary had created a unique listening experience that appealed to both their established audience and new listeners who were drawn to the program's intelligence and authenticity. The success of their pilot work had attracted the attention of a regional broadcasting company that was interested in syndicating their show to stations throughout the Midwest. The opportunity represented a significant advancement in their careers, but it also required them to make decisions about their future that would affect not just their professional lives, but their personal relationship as well. Carmen's graduation from college in May was celebrated with a party at the radio station that brought together everyone who had been part of their journey. Danny, who had watched his sister's transformation from protective older brother to supportive friend and colleague, spoke about the pride he felt in her achievements and the respect he had developed for her partnership with Marcus. The station staff, local listeners, and family members gathered to celebrate not just Carmen's academic success, but the collaborative work that had brought the community together. The graduation party also served as a farewell to the summer that had changed all of their lives. The radio station where Marcus and Carmen had first met had evolved into something more sophisticated and professional, but it retained the warmth and community focus that had made it special. The catalog system that Carmen had created during her first summer was still being used, and the programming innovations that had emerged from their collaboration had become permanent features of the station's identity. The decision about their future came during a late-night conversation in the DJ booth where their relationship had begun. Marcus and Carmen had been offered the opportunity to take their show to a larger market, with the financial security and professional recognition that would come with syndication. The offer was everything they had dreamed of during their months of separation and collaboration, but it also meant leaving the community that had nurtured their growth and supported their partnership. The conversation that followed was marked by the same honesty and intelligence that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. Both of them had grown during their time apart, and they had learned to balance their individual ambitions with their shared commitment to each other. The decision they needed to make would affect not just their careers, but their understanding of what they wanted from their lives together. Carmen's perspective had been shaped by her months in Chicago, where she had experienced the excitement and opportunities of a larger market, but had also observed the isolation and competition that could accompany professional success. Her internship had taught her that career advancement was meaningless without the personal relationships and community connections that provided life with meaning and purpose. Marcus had reached similar conclusions through his own experience at the station. The recognition he had received for his work was gratifying, but the most satisfying aspects of his career remained the connections he made with individual listeners and the sense of community that his show created. The prospect of reaching larger audiences was exciting, but not at the expense of the intimacy and authenticity that had made his work meaningful. The solution they developed was both practical and romantic, reflecting the combination of intelligence and emotion that had defined their relationship from the first dance. They would accept the syndication offer, but they would maintain their base in Cedar Falls and use the resources provided by their success to enhance the local programming that had been the foundation of their work. The decision represented a new model for media careers that prioritized community engagement and personal relationships over traditional markers of success. Marcus and Carmen had learned that their partnership was strongest when it was rooted in the values and connections that had brought them together, and they were determined to build their future on that foundation. The summer of 1984 began with a wedding that brought together everyone who had been part of their journey. The ceremony took place in the park, where the county fair had been held the previous year, with music provided by the radio station and reception held in the pavilion where they had shared their first dance. Danny served as Marcus's best man, symbolizing the friendship that had survived the complications of romance and had emerged stronger and more mature. The wedding celebration was broadcast live on the radio station, creating a shared experience for the entire community that had supported their relationship. Listeners called in with congratulations and memories, and the event became a testament to the power of media to create genuine connections between people who might otherwise never meet. As Marcus and Carmen began their married life together, they carried with them the lessons learned during their courtship and the confidence that comes from successfully navigating challenges through communication, respect, and shared values. The radio show that had begun as a way to maintain their connection during separation had evolved into a career that allowed them to combine their individual talents with their commitment to each other and their community. The story that had begun with a simple dance in the summer of 1983 had become something larger and more meaningful than either of them had imagined. Their love had not only survived the challenges of distance, career uncertainty, and family complications, but had been strengthened by them. The partnership they had created was both personal and professional, individual and collaborative, rooted in their community, but reaching toward larger possibilities. The final scene of their story took place in the same DJ booth where they had first worked together, now equipped with new technology and serving a larger audience, but retaining the intimacy and authenticity that had made their collaboration special. As they prepared for their evening show, Marcus and Carmen looked at each other with the understanding that comes from sharing not just success, but the journey that had made it possible. The music that began their show was the same song that had played during their first dance, but now it carried the weight of everything they had experienced together. The love that had begun with a simple request for a dance had become a partnership that would last a lifetime, and the story they had created together had become part of the larger narrative of their community and their time. And so our story comes to its beautiful conclusion. Marcus and Carmen have found their happily ever after through love, determination, and the magic of radio waves. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the summer of '83. Don't forget to subscribe to 80s Histories for more nostalgic tales of love and life in the greatest decade ever.